Action.
Hello. Hi, everyone. I'm Beth Johnson, and with me, as always, is scientist Franck Marchis, and this is the Grudge Report. But wait, Beth, Star Trek Discovery is over for the season. What's this? This is part one of a 10-part series on the best of Stargate SG-1. We're covering one episode per season as chosen by Stargate fans on gateworld.net. So first up, we're going to look at from season 1, episode 11, The Torment of Tantalus. Now, Franck, did you rewatch this last night?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so you're all ready.
I'm ready. I don't remember much, but I did watch the episode last night. I must confess that I watched this in French the first time. So this is new to me to watch it in English.
So my first question to you then would be, was it strange watching it in English?
No, after 30 years, I think I'm used to speak English and to listen to people speaking English around me. It's just that the voice are not the same. So, but I prefer the English version, definitely.
Fair enough. All right. So in this episode, I'll just give you a quick summary. Reminder, if you haven't watched Stargate SG-1, first off, where have you been? And second off, there will be spoilers, obviously. So in this episode, our favorite scientist, Daniel Jackson, is reviewing some old Pentagon footage of the early 1940s Stargate experiments. And he learns that not only did they get the gate up and running once, but someone went through it. Whew, that's big, because there's no record of any of this. They've never heard of this before. We're 11 episodes into the first season. We've got a movie under our belt, and this has never been mentioned. Okay. So he calls in Dr. Catherine Langford, who, of course, was on the original expedition that discovered the Stargate. Her father was involved in all of this. She's been sort of on the sidelines, and she brought Daniel into the whole situation. There's a lot of history there. And he wants her to know what's going on because he wants to know who these people are. And it turns out the guy who went through the Stargate is her somewhat fiance. And this is a big deal because she didn't know any of this. She was told he had died in an accident. And so Daniel does the correct thing, but not the Air Force thing, by bringing Catherine back to Stargate Command and basically having told her all of this classified stuff. Everybody winds up in agreement, and they all decide that they're going to go through this gate because they've managed to pull the symbols from the video footage, and they're going to go see if they can rescue this guy. Now, keep in mind, he's been there alone for 50 years, if he's even alive, and they have no idea going in, and Catherine's going with them. So this is all just really cool. It's kind of a neat little one-off episode, so you don't have to have like a lot of plot backstory to it. Which is good for Franck, because I had to rewatch all of this stuff with my husband last year, because that was what he did during the start of the pandemic. So, and Franck's just like, it's the middle of the season. So Franck, there was good science in this episode too, which made me really happy. And in fact, it's really focused on a lot of the science, because there's this whole big plot point about what Ernest has found on this barren world where there's no other people. He's literally been by himself for 50 years. His voice is cracked and dry when he tries to say hello. He's touching everybody to make sure they're real and not dreams. He's wearing not a single stitch of clothing, because why would he care? And, it's delightfully awkward that this suddenly old man is, surrounded by people. And so it's really neat. But in the process of all of this, while they're looking around and trying to figure out, should they stay? Should they go back? What do they need to do? What's the situation? Ernest shows Daniel this amazing room that seems to be a meeting place for all of the big races in the universe or in the galaxy. And it seems to be like they're sort of like United Nations. And in the midst of this, Ernest has also discovered a really cool thing. Can you talk about this really cool language science mashup that they found?
Yeah, so it's there on Heliopolis. That's the name of the planet. And apparently, as you mentioned, there is this United Nation of star. There is only 4 species that seems to communicate, to want to communicate in this place. There are different alphabets. We see that. And when you activate the device, we see in holographic projection from the 1997. So bear with us here. Some holographic projection that show sphere and little sphere orbiting around them. And the scientists quickly realized that what they are looking at here, those are atoms, basically. Those are the elements that make matters in our universe. So we see hydrogen, helium, and so on. We point out a few of them during the show, and they talk about what those are used for. So there's a lot of science here. One of the sciences that I want to mention is that in the representation, they use what we call the Bohr model, which is a model of atoms, of the structure of an atom that was developed in 1913, if I remember, by this Norwegian physicist, Niels Bohr. And in this case, what you have is a nucleus with positive charges, so made of protons and neutrons. And in orbit around, like planets, we have tiny electrons.
Right.
This model has been developed at the beginning of the last century and used to explain what we call the electronic transition. So it's basically the idea is that atoms orbit around the nucleus, but sometimes the atoms can go to another level when they're excited. Right. They absorb a photon and they go to another level, etc. And you can characterize any elements in the periodic table by the number of proton they have, and that's basically the model that's been used for years. But in fact, even if this was recorded in 1997, I was finishing my master at the time. The Bohr model we knew already was inaccurate. In fact, the Bohr model is a representation of the reality, and the reality of what is an atom. It's derived from quantum mechanics. Right. It's what we call the quantum mechanical model. And in this case, it's super weird, and very few people really understand, because I think nobody really understands. In this case, we have still the positive nucleus, and we have electrons around it. And those electrons have a probability of existing at different states, at different locations. So if you look, you will not see a big sphere, and tiny dots around like we've seen in the movie. You will see a big sphere and a swarm of particles which are here or not here, and that's what we call probability of existence. And that's the way we basically represent now atoms. And that's we don't really understand it, but it does work, and and that's the beauty of quantum mechanics. We don't have to really understand it. We have a bunch of equations that explain to us the probability of location and energy state of atoms based on the presence of these electrons, and it does work. So
right, correction. All you need is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, and you too can understand or not understand quantum physics at your leisure.
Yeah, exactly. So the problem of the quantum mechanics is that you cannot make a measurement. If you look, you make a measurement. Like if you want to know if the electrons is here, you perturbating the system. So you will not have a correct estimate of the existence of the presence of the electrons, because by measuring, you acting on the system. That's what we're using this equation of probability.
You either know the place or you know the speed, but you don't know the place and the speed at the same time because you're observing it. So, yeah, quantum mechanics, not my favorite class in my physics degree. So one, the science that they're using is a teensy bit outdated, but on an elementary level where we're trying to talk about using it to communicate, it still makes sense, because what they're trying to do is break down these elements into their simplest points, right? So you're somehow using this as a form of communication. You know, you can look at it, and whether you call it helium or something else, you know what it is by this somewhat simple diagram, right?
Yeah. So we classify those into this periodic table. That's maybe what you wanted to mention. And they mentioned that in the show, which is kind of nice. I did not check, but during the show, they say, okay, we have in the 1945, we had 90 elements in the periodic table that we also call Mendeleev table, because that's Mendeleev is a Russian scientist who were the first one to kind of try to build this table. Maybe we can explain what is the table.
And Catherine mentions that there are 111 in 1997 on the table, which is still not true for you and I today, right? There's a few more than that now. So
yeah, there is 118 now, I think.
Right. And in the show they're saying there's 146, which is an interesting idea, but having seen how difficult it has been to get to 118, I question the ability to make it to 146. Because of course we have problems where trying to keep these together and keep enough neutrons in the system so that your protons aren't, you know, flying away from each other has proven to be very difficult. And all of these elements above a certain point are radioactive for that reason. They don't hold together very well. And in fact,
some of them have live. Go ahead. Use that.
No, the ones that are like above 110 or so usually are lifespans of like microseconds, where they've made them once or twice and gone, "Yay, we found an element." And
so yeah, we synthesize those
not anything
now.
Useful. Yeah, they're synthesized.
They're from 95 to 118. They don't exist in a natural state. So they exist in laboratories, in nuclear explosions, but we don't have we cannot find them in natural state. The other one we can, all the way to plutonium 94.
Right. So the show implies that there are a whole lot more elements out there that we don't have here on Earth or in our solar system, or that we can detect.
So why these 146, that's what's the number, elements are useful. And I like, this is a moment I really like in the show, is they quickly concluded that this is a way for the species to communicate. They use those elements as an alphabet to communicate with each other, because species have different languages, of course, but they also probably have different mindset. And that's something that we are starting thinking a lot about. It's very difficult for these two species. It will be very difficult for two species intelligent to communicate, because they probably don't have the same perception of time. I don't know, the psychology is different.
The physiology
we don't have
is different.
The physiology is different.
This comes up, I think, in the movie Interstellar. You know, you don't necessarily have the same frames of reference for different things, right? Like an apple might not mean the same thing to someone else. It might look the same, but it might not be the same. And so you have to really figuring out how to understand someone who has like none of the same cultural background at all on a species level is really is a challenge, and something we do talk about at the Institute sometimes. Other people than us.
So solution that it's been mentioned as well by in the movie Contact is that if two species want to communicate with each other, first of all they need to communicate such as they show that they are intelligent. So mathematical symbols, so mathematical concepts could be the way to show they're intelligent, because mathematical concepts are universal, we think. So that could be the prime numbers or the pi number, for instance.
Right. And so this takes it to a different place, rather than simply mathematically breaking down the physical universe, essentially down to the very, very basic building blocks. obviously
the 146 element.
one step beyond quarks. So we'll just leave those out there. But these very easy to build, basically, elements that could be recognizable anywhere. Because at some point, a scientific society is going to figure out how things are put together and made. And if you are a spacefaring one, you've obviously had to learn that.
Yeah, so now developing a language with 146 elements, imagine an alphabet with 146 letters, it's a complicated task. I have no idea how they put this together, and that would be interesting to see how the interaction between those species truly work with this language, artificial language. We have created artificial language, in fact. One of them is called Esperanto. I don't know if you heard about that.
No, I know of Esperanto. I mean, let's be honest. Klingon is an artificial language. It's and you can even look at Game of Thrones. Dothraki is an artificial language, but they're fully fleshed out. Like they've actually had linguists write books on how to speak these languages. So you can create language. We do it every day. Our vocabulary is always changing. It's not a static state. So 146 letters actually kind of gives you a lot more room to play, I think. But we never really kind of get to understand that in the show, because of course it wouldn't be a Stargate episode without the drama going on in the background, which is that this building that they're in has been devastated by these storms on a regular basis and is currently being hit by one. And of course, the team has shown up right when this storm is going to be the one that destroys the building. So they're all trying to get out of there. The dial home device, which is how to get back from the Stargate, is busted. We have to have some high level drama. And Daniel is very upset at the prospect of having to leave this information trove behind and not do anything about it. Now Ernest has made a book out of it, so somehow he's managed to keep a record and do a lot of logging of all of this stuff for 50 years. But how did it make you feel watching a scientist have to turn his back on just a wealth of information that could unlock a whole bunch of stuff about the universe?
Yeah, the scene is really the typical scene. I think it's very the few people see scientists, and I will say that we are not all like that. The building is about to collapse, and the guy is insisting in staying there to try to get a little bit more data to be able to understand the machine or how it works. Even though Ernest has been there for 50 years, and you probably have a lot of free time to do his own research by himself. So instead of relying in the last half a second you have before the collapse of the entire building and killing everybody, he should maybe just focus on the book and just take the books and take the guy, Ernest, with him, who's going to give him way more information. So for me, that's really a parody of a scientist. And I just would like to say one more time, we are not like that. Some of us, true, but not all of us are like this. I will basically take Ernest with me, take him to take a shower too, but by the way, and get the book and done.
Well, he had water, so I'm sure he was fine that way. But I'm more concerned about Ernest's poor clothes, because he does come back out in an outfit, and you had made a note of it. Like, what is he wearing? And I remember looking at it last night and thinking, oh, I know what that is. So it's got the big circular collar, because he was essentially wearing a spacesuit to go through the wormhole, because they didn't know it was on the other side. They didn't know what to expect. So they had, just your standard spacesuits going for them. And so he's got this old 1940s style, but of course fabric doesn't last. It's, it can, but if it's getting worn by somebody, as I read in Packing for Mars, it breaks down very easily against the skin after a while. So 50 years, I'm pretty impressed that he still had even shreds of it left at that point, which is probably a good reason to stop wearing it. If you realize that you don't really need to and you want to preserve it, don't wear it, because the oils on your skin will actually break down that fabric far more quickly than the environment will.
So that's basically what what our viewers should remember from this show, from this conversation, is that if you go through a Stargate and you're stuck over there, the first thing you need to do, if you're by yourself, you get undressed completely. It's useless to wear your clothes because they're going to warm up very
Exactly.
quickly.
They're going to wear out very quickly anyway. So if you ever are rescued and you still want to have clothes to go home in, you might want to hang on to those, pack them away safely away from the elements, and let them breathe, I guess. It's kind of interesting how, like, on, they get things right, like his voice is scratchy from disuse, right? Like he talks to himself. He writes in his journal and talks to Catherine that way, but when he first says something to them, his voice is all crackly, and then as he's using it, of course, it gets better. And that, that's been seen. I mean, most of us feel that way when we wake up in the morning. I wake up and I'm like, hold on, let me get some water, hot tea, something. And so they get the little things like this right, and then you look at this elemental table and you're like, I'm still like boggled by this 146 elements. And I'm also just, Daniel, like, taking it so seriously that he wanted to just stay and work on it. Like, what good does that do anybody, Daniel? That isn't even logical. Like, you stay behind, you can't get home, no one's ever going to see this information but you anyway. Whereas if you leave and take the book in earnest, then there's still stuff that can be done. So I understand the moment was dramatic, but I think I could have done without that one.
Yeah, and if you want to criticize the science, the lightning scene, it's very come on. So maybe you can describe what they're trying to do with the lightning.
So, my headset. Okay, so they're trying to power up the dial home device basically by getting a lightning strike to hit it, so that they can generate enough electricity to power it back on, because there's no way to configure. If, of course, everything is it's very typical sci-fi action. Everything's going to happen at the very last second and everything's falling apart and there's always a risk of death. And I mean, this show really took it down to the very last possible seconds on pretty much everything, from getting the dial home device activated to getting back through the Stargate. So they're trying to hook it up to get lightning from the storm outside. And Ernest hands them his old 1940s astronaut, or not even astronaut at that point. It would have been more like a submarine type helmet, right? So it's the big bulbous circular thing. And they make the comment about putting something round to attract the lightning.
Yeah.
What was that about? It didn't even make any sense to me.
And it's interesting because they say, let's do the Benjamin Franklin thing. So someone read what Benjamin Franklin did. Okay, Benjamin Franklin, what he did basically in the 1750-ish, he took a kite, he put a rod on it, a metallic rod, and he flew the kite, and the lightning struck the kite. So that's where he discovered that the lightning is electricity. So someone read that the experiment, what he did, but then they missed the entire part, that what is very important is that you need to have a metallic rod. If you don't have that, the lightning is not going to come to you. The spherical helmet is not going to attract any lightning. They could have been there waiting for it for a long time before getting the charge to power the gate. Sorry.
So we got some things right, some things wrong in this episode. Overall, I thought, I mean, it is the fan favorite of the season. It is one of my favorites because the story itself behind all of that science is really about the people involved. It's about finding Ernest. It's about bringing Catherine and Ernest back together, bringing Catherine back into the fold and letting her know that this research that she spent her life on actually paid off. So I really like that. It doesn't necessarily advance a lot of the background plots very much, and that's kind of probably why it's another one of those fan favorites. It does, and it holds well. Even looking at those holographic CGI from 1997, it's not that bad.
Yeah.
So I mean, I've seen worse that hasn't held up as well. So overall, I really liked rewatching this episode. How about you?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it does remind me memories of when I was a student and I was waiting for the next episode. And, there was a time we had TV and it was once a week. It was not Netflix where we could watch all of them in one afternoon. Um, and I did like watching those Stargates and discovering those worlds, those exoplanets. And at the time, we did not call them yet exoplanets. It's kind of crazy.
Mm-mm. Right, 1997, we'd only found like one or two.
One or
right?
two, and it was still a debate whether or not
Yeah,
it was truly an exoplanet.
right. And now, and I know Samantha Carter was a huge influence on my decision to go back to school and actually get my degree in physics. And I kind of always wanted to be Samantha Carter, but without the Air Force side of it. So I really love the way that character was done, and I really appreciate the thought that Amanda Tapping always put into portraying the character. I honestly would love to see a revival with her back as, say, like the SG-1 commander or the Stargate command, like the whole thing. That would be really cool. All right, I think that's everything we wanted to cover, right?
Yep, that's everything.
All right. So again, this is the first part of a 10-part series on the best of Stargate SG-1. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode from season 2. And if you're really dying to know what that is, go check out gateworld.net and look for their best of list. That's where I pulled these from. It's all the episodes that I would have put on it anyway, so I'm really good with the list. And thank you for watching, everyone. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring the bell, share, and keep commenting and let us know what else you want to see. Frank will be back next week with his other co-host Margaret, and they are going to start looking at The Expanse season 4. So they're going to go back in time and start back there. So we have more to come. Thanks everybody for watching.
Bye-bye.